Well, I am really pleased. This looks wonderful.
Oh, it's terrific.
You like the little bird sculpture there?
He's cute.
Hi, I'm Avian Rogers.
And I'm Les Sizik. We just built this bookcase in our shop, and today we're going to show you how to do it.
You know, it may look difficult, but it's actually a series of simple woodworking steps that are easy to learn.
And once we take you through it step by step, you'll be able to build shelves like this in almost any room in your house.
So let's get down to the wood shop and get started.
Good idea.
So this is a model of the bookcase that we're going to show you how to build today. I want to take you through the component parts of it. We built the shell or carcass out of AA oak veneer plywood. Now what that means is that both sides of the plywood are layered with a thin coating, a thin surface of solid oak. Now, plywood is an excellent material for this because the bookcase is fairly wide and fairly tall. It holds its shape very well and it's very strong. You'll also get a consistent kind of surface. You're not going to have to worry about knots or splitting. Okay, then the next thing we did is we then faced it with a face frame and these little thin shelf strips on the verticals and the shelves. That's all solid oak, and that covers up the layered edges of the plywood. Right here we have an adjustable shelf, and to accomplish that we've drilled holes all the way up along the side, so we can adjust that to varying heights. Also on the back side. We have a door here. We'll show you how to construct it and to hang it. Up here along the top, we've got a crown molding, two-piece crown molding. Now, we did not put a back on the unit because we've decided we're going to push ours up against the wall. We'd like our back to show through. You may or may not decide to do that. But in any case, we think this is a very attractive unit. So let's go through the steps involved in building it.
Well, before the fun starts, let's review the steps we're going to go through. First, we have a real good plan we're going to follow. Next, we're going to cut out all the plywood parts. Then we're going to make the dado cuts in the plywood parts and drill them for our movable shelves. Then we're going to assemble the carcass, build and attach the face frame, install the molding, build the door and hang it, put on a beautiful finish. Now the tools we'll need, in addition to ordinary shop tools, will be a table saw, a dado set, a doweling jig, and a shaper or router. Let's get to work.
To start the construction of our bookcase, the first thing we want to do is rip the sides and the shelves down to size. Now I checked the plans and they're both 16 inches wide. So I set the saw by measuring from the fence to the inside of the blade. You always want to cut with the blade on the scrap side of the wood to allow for the thickness of that saw cut, which is about 1/8 of an inch. It's called the kerf. Okay. Now, even though we've got these extension tables, because we're cutting a full 4x8 sheet of plywood, I'm definitely going to need Les's help.
And we're going to need this roller stand, which will catch the plywood after it comes off the table.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, let's lift her up.
Get that in the right place. We're going to cut this with the good side up, right?
Yeah. I'll go over there.
All righty.
Okay, now when you're ripping a piece of plywood, you want to be sure that the plywood is running smoothly along that fence. In fact, it's more important to keep your eye on the wood running along the fence than the blade itself. Okay, now the other thing, since I'm going to be tailing the board, which is catching it as it's coming through, that I'm only supporting the weight. I'm not pulling the wood through. Les will do the pushing. Okay, let's get our sleeves rolled up. Oh, you're already... Glasses. Ready to roll?
I'm ready to go.
Okay. We finished our ripping of our plywood. Now we're ready to cut everything to length. That's called cross-cutting. And we're set up here with our miter gauge. I've got my mark for the side at 6'3". That's all lined up. A cross-cutting means that you're cutting across the grain. Ripping means you're cutting with the grain. Since this side is so long, I'm definitely going to need some help. Les,
Yo,
you think you
Amy.
could give me a hand?
Certainly.
Okay, great. The safety glasses. Check it. We're ready to roll.
One of the challenges that every woodworker faces from time to time is making multiple parts exactly the same size. And that's one of the challenges we have here in our bookcase. Now, one way to do that would be to take your tape, mark out the part, and then take it to the saw and cut to that mark. Then I'd have to repeat it again until I had all three parts the same. Now, I can tell you right now from experience that there's no way that anyone can mark, measure, and cut three different parts and have them come out identical using that method. But let me show you a little trick that will solve that problem for you and will give you multiple parts. You can cut up to 100 parts this way. They're all going to be exactly the same. Now we're going to use our miter gauge for this cut, and we're going to use the rip fence also. It's very, very dangerous, however, to ever have a piece of wood using the miter gauge and the rip fence at the same time. So we're going to use a stop block for safety. Now I've got the stop block set up here opposite my blade, and I've set it exactly at 15.5 inches, which is the length we want for our little movable shelves in the bookcase. Now for safety, I'm going to move my stop block all the way back here so it will not be involved in the cut. And it's clamped tightly against the fence. Then all I need to do is move my stock. You can see how it fits right against my stop block. And now when I make this cut, it'll be exactly 15 3/4, and I can make cuts like this all day long at 15 3/4. Watch this. This is so simple, it's a real pleasure. Now I've got my setup, and I can make repeated cuts like this all day long. Now that we've got our shelves pretty well done, let's go to the bench and we'll make our dado cuts in the sides. Well, things are really starting to move along now. We've got all our plywood parts cut out for the entire bookcase. Now we need to treat with our end pieces. This is an end piece here. Here's the end and the finished product. We need to make some cuts in it. First, we need to make a rabbet cut so the top will fit in up here. We're going to drill holes for our adjustable shelf brackets like this. And then we're going to make an important dado cut right here in the center. And this dado, there's a dado cut because we're going to support a lot of weight on this shelf here. This dado cut is for this shelf right here, and it has to be very, very straight right across here. We can't have it tilting one way or the other. And in order to accomplish that, we've got the two side pieces of the bookcase clamped down to the bench, and we have a straight edge that goes right across both of them. This permits us to make that dado cut in both pieces at the same time, and also to assure that they're precisely located just where we want them. Now in this case, we've set up the straight edge 5 3/4 inches from the bottom. We know that in our router base, we've got a space of 2 3/4 inches from the cutter to the edge of the base, so if we ride the edge of the router base right along this straight edge, our cut's going to be exactly 2 inches from the bottom, and that's just where we want it. We've made sure we're nice and square here with our framing square. We've got everything clamped down very solidly to the bench so nothing's going to move. And when we use the router, we have to be careful to use our eye protection. And also, as you're going to hear in a minute, the router makes a lot of noise, and so we're going to use some ear protection. Now we're ready to go and make our cut. I've got this router set for the precise depth of this cut. We want to end up with a 3/8 inch deep cut, and it has to be 3/4 inch wide, and we're ready to go. In order to make dado cuts on the table saw, it's pretty simple, but there are a few things we have to change. The first thing we did was take off the upper guard. The reason for that is a dado cut is simply a groove in a piece of wood. We're not making two separate pieces of wood. So that guard has to come out of our way. The next thing we did was put in a different table insert that has a wider opening, and it permits the dado set to come up through our tabletop. Then we put the dado set itself on, and as you can see, the dado set is simply a series of different blades, 2 cutter blades and a series of chippers in between. We set those up to the exact thickness of the dado we want. In this case, it's 3/4